Hey, this is Lorena, and I wanted to do a video for you on how to add 3 borders to a quilt top and to add a scrappy border. Yes, I did a scrappy border. So this tutorial is going to be how to do that. So I'll see you in the border adding. Yes, border adding. Is that a thing? Alright, I have a video on how I do my borders. I will link it up here somewhere. It has a little bit more details, but I am going to kind of give you a general way of how I do my borders, but it's going to be kind of quick and fast, okay? All right, let's start cutting our fabric. I went ahead and bought 1.5 yards of fabric to make this border. Now you don't need that much, but I used this color twice to go around the quilt. I pretty much used a lot of it. I only had about that much left over. Also too, I cut a certain way. I don't know if it's on the straight of the grain or on the bias. I believe it's on the straight of the grain, but like I said, I have a video with more information on how to cut your border. Let's start measuring the quilt top. You're going to measure the top, the center, and the bottom, and you're going to get 3 numbers. You're going to divide those numbers by 3, and now you have your average measurement. So you're going to go ahead and cut your border the length average of your measurement that you got. So what I did is I cut 2 pieces that measurement, and then I started pinning each edge and the center and started working in any puddling. You're going to pin the top and go ahead and pin the bottom. Now after you do that, you're going to go ahead and go to your sewing machine, and if you have puddling, you're going to work that in, and if you don't, you're just going to sew a straight line, and then you have your top and bottom borders added. Now after you do that, you're going to do the same exact thing again. You're going to measure the right side, the center, and the left side of your quilt, depending on how you started. Add those 3 numbers and get your average, and then cut your border the size of your average. You're going to go ahead and pin again, and then sew that fabric down exactly like I just shared. I don't want to bore you by repeating the process. And I'm also going to share some pictures of what the first border looks like. Now you don't have to do 3 borders. You could just do 1, but I also recommend if you're going to do 1 border, kind of thicken it up a little bit. I did these borders smaller on purpose because I was going to add more borders to this. Border number 2. Alright, I had a whole bunch of leftover scrap fabric, so I decided to cut that fabric. I believe it was 4 by 2s, and I just cut a whole bunch of them together, and I started adding 2 of those pieces together, and then I added the 2 sewn pieces and sewn them together. So now I have 4, and I did a couple sets of those. Now I ended up making a set of 8 scrappy pieces, and then I ironed everything and I trimmed them down to 3.5. Now if you have your scrappy pieces bigger or smaller, it's all up to you. This is your design process, but I'm sharing with you what I did for my quilt if you like mine. And then I had 8 scrappy strips like that that were 3.5 by 13. The reason I trimmed them down is you can see that once I sewn them together, they were wonky because some of the fabric was probably on the bias, and when I was ironing it probably stretched a little bit. So trimming everything down kind of gets everything nice and crisp for you. Once I trimmed that down, I knew the width of cutting my second border. You know how we added the measurement on the first border? You're going to do the exact same thing, but now you're doing the measurement with a border added. So you get your 3 measurements, the top, center, and bottom, or right, center, and left, whatever you want to start with, and then you get your average size. Now this is kind of different because I have 3.5 inch by 13 inch strips, and I wanted to add 2 of them, 1 on each end, okay? Whatever I got the number for the border, I subtracted 26. Now I also added 1 inch to that number, and the reason I did that is because you're going to lose a 1/2 inch when you add that scrappy border to your piece of fabric. So you want to add 1 inch to your measurement because you're going to lose 1 inch when you're sewing those seams together. Now you're going to make yourself 2 borders. After you do that, you're going to go ahead and pin your borders to the quilt top. Of course, exactly like we did the first border, and then you're going to work any fullness in. I'm also sharing with you clips of what the border looked like when I did it on the right side and on the left side. Once you have your two borders on and you iron, it's time to go ahead and repeat the measurement process. You're going to go ahead and measure the top of your quilt top. You're going to also measure the center again and the bottom, and then you're going to add those three numbers together and get your average. Now remember, whatever size your scrappy sections are, you're going to subtract that to your measurement and then add an inch, and there you have the top border and the bottom border made. You're going to attach it the same way as you did the first border. So I went ahead on border number 3 and did exactly the same steps that I did to border 1 and the same steps that I did to border 2. Now the difference is I don't have to add the scrappy bits that I did on border 2. It's just a long strip. I think I was a little short and I had to add like a little bit of length to the border because it wasn't long enough. But after I did that, everything was perfect. Now, if you want to know if you have put your border on well, if you measure the top and bottom, the measurements should pretty much be the same. If it's like a ½ inch off or an inch off, it'll be okay. But if it's more than that, that means you're going to have problems with waviness. I also recommend that you measure the opposite ends. You want your numbers to be either the same or at least maybe at the most an inch different. So make sure when you're ironing that you're not pulling the fabric, and also when you're showing the quilt that you're not pulling the quilt, because then you can warp it and stretch it out, and then your long armer and or you are going to have problems quilting it. It's going to be wavy. All right, well, this is my tutorial on how to make 3 borders on a quilt top. I think it's lovely. I'll post some pictures of how beautiful this quilt top looks like. All right, thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. I hope you're having a wonderful week. All right, bye.